You mentioned people in relationships who start to feel disconnected and are unable to communicate. Sure, husband and wife are willing to say, yeah, we want to communicate better. But if you tell them, okay, step one is really tapping in and being honest with yourself, communicating with yourself better. Are you able to look at those wounds that occurred in childhood, as you've mentioned, that are still running the show in this relationship? Are you willing to forgive yourself? Are you willing to forgive others? Before we even get into that conversation of husband and wife connecting with each other, are you willing to do the deeper work? And a lot of people go, oh, that doesn't feel great. So really looking at the fact that we are operating on these subconscious patterns, and are we truly willing to change them, or are the secondary gains too great?
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. Hey, welcome back to Coach Soul. What a great way to be able to look at our subconscious mind. And Lani Gonzales is with us as a special guest. And yeah, she might be a clinical hypnotherapist and things like that. So she's not going to hypnotize me because I'm afraid to cluck like a chicken. I don't think that's how it works. So thank you for being on the show. And tell us a little bit about your background so we can have our viewers and listeners to understand what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so I'm so happy to be here with you. So I am a recovering litigation attorney. I practiced law for 13 years and was a partner at a law firm. And my heart has always been called to serve. And you can only ignore that call so long. So I retired from that law firm practice and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. So I went back to school and really focused on serving in a bigger way. So right now, what I love to do is help people who feel stuck, whether it's their health, whether it's their wealth, their mental health, their finances. I help them get unstuck by tapping into the subconscious, which is really what hypnotherapy is designed to do. So it's not about plucking like a chicken or anything like that. It's really about getting to the root cause of what ails us.
So that's interesting. You leave the law field and you get into this. What is it that drove you to leave the legal field and get into this type of subconscious mind?
Ooh, I would say number one, my own personal journey. So I would say that I was one of the people who was successful on the outside, but hollow on the inside. And I built this life to look good on paper because I didn't feel good on the inside. And one of my motivations for being an attorney, I believe that it was a way to speak for people who could not speak for themselves. And that was incredibly helpful. And it helped me find my own voice. But one of the things that I realized that would be even more beneficial is not to just speak for people and advocate for people, but can I teach people how to speak and advocate for their wants, their needs, that big life they're creating? So I do believe that it's not just about profit and it's about our purpose. And for me, my purpose is really trying to help other people find theirs.
You know, that's interesting because oftentimes the clientele that I get, especially with men, they seem to have lost their identity and a sense of purpose in what they're trying to find. And when you think about the clientele that I have is more of the couples and family or individuals, and they get themselves stuck and they just don't know where to go within this relationship. Oftentimes they'll complain about communication is the issue. And I'm probably one of the few therapists that says, no, that's a symptom because we are communicating might be on childhood hurt level of yelling and screaming because we want to feel safe and seen and heard and all that. But at the same time, you know, we tend to look at communication as the issue when to me, fear is the issue. We get stuck in the childhood hurts and traumas. And if we don't work on those and we carry that into the marriage, it seems to baggage itself. And that's where we get the 65% or higher in second marriages end. So when you think about working with someone who has lost purpose or they lost their identity or somewhat, what do you work with first in trying to help them not to be so stuck?
When it comes to the issue of feeling like you lost your purpose or if you've lost your identity, it's not necessarily that we're disconnected from that. It's that we're just disconnected, period. So a lot of us, we live our lives on autopilot, right? So when we talk about the subconscious mind, which is over 95% of what happens in your mind, it's these automatic processes that we do over and over again without critical reflection, critical inquiry about what we're doing. We just know we're supposed to go through the motions. We're supposed to show up at work. We're supposed to show up and work from 9 to 5. We pay the mortgage. We eat, we sleep, we poop. We repeat over and over and over again. And we never stop to ask, does this make me whole? Does this feel good in my body? We don't ask, does this serve a higher purpose or a higher calling? So at some point in life, when we are in this routine of constantly just going through the motions, and eventually what stops us is maybe our body hurts, maybe our relationships are suffering, something happens in our life and we halt. And then we go, wait a minute. I don't think I'm happy. I don't think I'm fulfilled. I don't think I have purpose. And that's the problem from the very beginning, is that we move through the motion so quickly. So if someone came to me and said, hey, I've lost my purpose and I've lost my identity, what is it that I actually need to do? Step one, defining manageable goals and realistic expectations. And what I tell people is, your purpose is not a destination. Purpose is a way of life. And what do I mean by purpose is a way of life? It's these everyday choices we make and we align with, does this align with my values? Does this align with who I am as a human being? So we can always come back to that center, come back to our values and come back to our purpose. But step one is realizing we've been running on autopilot. Are you willing to stop running on autopilot? Most people will say yes, but I'm going to tell you, most people are not. And here's why. There's something called secondary gains. And what secondary gains means is, even though you're unhappy with your life, you still run through the motions and do it anyways, because there is some benefit there. And the perceived difficulty of changing your life is much harder than actually making a change. And I'm going to give you an example. You mentioned people in relationships who start to feel disconnected and are unable to communicate. Sure, husband and wife are willing to say, yeah, we want to communicate better. But if you tell them, okay, step one is really tapping in and being honest with yourself, communicating with yourself better. Are you able to look at those wounds that occurred in childhood, as you've mentioned, that are still running the show in this relationship? Are you willing to forgive yourself? Are you willing to forgive others? Before we even get into that conversation of husband and wife connecting with each other, are you willing to do the deeper work? And a lot of people go, oh, that doesn't feel great. So really looking at the fact that we are operating on these subconscious patterns, and are we truly willing to change them, or are the secondary gains too great?
You know, when I think about what you're saying, it's so easy, repetitious or habit. You know, our phone dings, we got to immediately pick it up and think we got to instantly. And I was talking to somebody the other day that I feel like we get programmed in such a way that we feel like we have to answer the phone call, answer a text or an email, because we don't want the other person to be disappointed if we don't answer. So there's that pressure to be able to engage in such a way that I think we've lost a way of sitting back, putting electronics away for a bit and self meditate. And I think this everyday life, I mean, you think about it, we drive through restaurants really fast because we haven't mastered self regulation.
Yeah.
We become so impulsive that I believe these things tend to drive us into such a way that we're not happy because they're not self fulfilling. It's like eating a sugar donut thinking it's great food, but you get that sugar high, you come crashing down. Is that kind of what you're kind of saying, expressing there, that maybe sometimes these outward things that encounter in our lives gets us stuck?
Absolutely. So the outward things that we encounter definitely get us stuck, but it starts with our internal framework, right? So we really are more powerful than we think. We are not slaves to our phone. We're not slaves to those notifications to answer. The question is, what is our internal framework? And you mentioned something really interesting. You said, oh, I don't want to disappoint others by not responding quickly enough. That's
Right.
part of the internal framework. If your internal framework is, I'm focused, I value my peace, and I'll respond when the time is right, and there's no rush, and they'll be happy to receive the information that I give them in the phone call I give them at the time that it's delivered. That's a different type of internal framework, right? So if you do operate, which a lot of people do, with the I don't want people to be disappointed in me, then that's what needs to be fixed. It's not so much the phone, right? So a lot of times we focus on how do I fix my external circumstances so that I can feel good inside? It's the opposite way. How do I fix my internal programming? How do I fix my nervous system so that external things don't bother me? So that phone can ring all day. Those notifications can go all day, but we have our calm center. If our calm and our peace is contingent upon controlling external circumstances, that is not true peace. That's control. So it really starts with looking at what's within us.
But when you think about starting looking at things that's within us, oftentimes I found with my own clients, they get discouraged, unhappy because of how they feel, what they see, and they don't want to sit in that emotion. So they tend to avoid. And so you can do so much cognitive therapy with people, but then they're stuck in these emotions because they get into survival mode. How does that affect, this happiness? Because we feel like we got to look at happiness outside of ourselves. Well, my spouse has got to make me happy. You have to make me happy. Or sometimes when I was dating, I would look at profiles. I want a guy who makes me smile. And I'm like, are we looking for outside things to help us to feel happy when we're so confused on the inside?
Yeah. So my goal and what I strive for my clients to achieve is not happiness, it is peace. And the difference between happiness and peace you can feel even if you're not happy. My definition of peace is that my soul is good with whatever exists in my life right now because I know that my soul has called it forth for my greater good. So that's my definition of peace. And how do we get to that place of peace? You're going to read a lot of books. You're going to listen to a lot of meditations and podcasts, and they're going to tell you, well, choose positive thoughts. Think the highest positive thought. Yes, but we want to have these high positive thoughts, but sometimes what we need in order to have even higher thoughts is to unburden ourselves from those emotions that are heavy and difficult. So recognizing that by looking at those uncomfortable feelings, we're able to elevate ourselves even more. And let's talk about looking at those uncomfortable feelings, because you said a lot of people don't like to feel their feelings because they feel stuck inside of it. I've seen from my clients, they don't like to expose themselves to their feelings because when they do, it seems like this big ordeal. The reason it seems so big is because you've ignored it for so long. And if we had listened when it would whisper, we wouldn't need for it to yell. So a couple of things to keep in perspective. A lot of times those emotions exist and they feel so bad simply because they've festered. And when we look at things, they're not as bad as they appear to be. Why? Those emotions are tied usually to past experiences. Here's the good news. You have already experienced it. The worst is done. And now we're looking at it with older, wiser, more compassionate eyes. And whether you're with a therapist, a hypnotherapist, a guide, you're doing it with someone who is helping you and guiding you through that experience. Number two, if we want those difficult emotions to leave, Rumi has a quote: the cure for the pain is in the pain, and you got to move through it. And there's a poem called The Guest House, written by Rumi. And he talks about treating all of the emotions like visitors to a guest house. So treat every emotion as though they are a visitor, welcome them, give them a seat, give them what they need. And he says, even if the guest comes with the intention to rob you, maybe, just maybe, they're making space for something even better. But the point of the guest house is once those guests are fully satisfied, they leave. So these emotions, it's simply information. It is a way that our body communicates to us that there is a need that needs to be met. If we honor the emotion fully and completely, and that need is met, it leaves on its own without us having to force it. So, for example, here's a common one because I work a lot with women: anger. A lot of women go, I don't want to feel angry. Anger doesn't look good on women. We're not taught how to hold anger. We're taught how to hold shame. So a lot of women have some flavor of shame in them. Women are not really taught how to express anger, but all emotions have an intelligence. And anger is the emotion of injustice. The reason that it exists and shows up is some part of us is registering something is unfair. And if we keep ignoring it, that injustice will persist within us. So if we look at anger, we don't have to attach to it. We don't have to be anger. We have anger. We aren't anger. Look at our anger. What is it that you wish for me to know? And that's a helpful way to look at emotions from a different perspective. Instead of holding it in here, hold it out here. Pretend it's a friend. Pretend it's a visitor to your guest house. What does it need for you to know? What does it want so that it can simply leave? Does it want better boundaries? Does it want you to use your voice? And if you hear that fully and completely and honor the message of that emotion, it leaves and it makes space for a higher feeling thought, a higher feeling emotion.
You know, when you think about trying to sort all this stuff out, right? Some people just don't know where to begin because there's so much weight they've been carrying on for years of their the journey in their life. But when it comes to hypnotherapy, we kind of mentioned that at the beginning, and oftentimes I think we forget that's an option. But sometimes when you talk about hypnotherapy, we see what we see on TV and think, okay, we don't want to be a chicken, or we're afraid to express some inner deep thoughts, or we're afraid that something we bury in our subconscious may pop out and we're going to relive the situation again. Or even in this instance, we are reliving these episodes. I kind of remember an old TV show, and it was a military show, and kind of comedy, took place in Korea, that type of thing. And one of the scenes where he was put under, and he remembered having the sneezing of a wet blanket nobody could figure out. So he brought in a psychiatrist, put him under and found out that he lost his brother, and that was a reminder to him. So when it comes to hypnotherapy for you, what is it that people can know that can feel safe about hypnotherapy, what it is, what it isn't?
Yeah, so let's talk about what people know about hypnotherapy. A lot of times people think hypnotherapy is when someone is on stage and they're clucking like a chicken. Is that actually real? Most of the time, yes. But people who go to these types of shows are there to be entertained. They're there to have a good time. And when you start walking into that venue, there are literally people scanning everyone in the audience to see who is most susceptible to being hypnotized. And the people that you see on stage who are clucking like a chicken and doing all those things, it's because they want it. They want to experience something different. They want to feel fun. They want to be part of a joke. So they are open to receiving those suggestions that they receive from a hypnotist. Now, hypnotherapy, and when you see a hypnotherapist, we are diving into the subconscious mind, but you are always in control. You're not completely zoned out. So when we're in hypnotherapy, you think of theta brain wave state. you're still coherent. So I'm going to give you an example of theta brainwave state. If you're driving your car and you're not thinking, but you manage to get home without thinking about the directions and you're kind of just in the zone, that's probably theta. When you are scrolling on your phone and all of a sudden you thought it was 5 minutes, but it ends up being an hour and you lost track of time, our sense of time gets distorted when we are in theta. When you wake up and you're a little bit groggy, or when you're about to fall asleep, you're in theta. So theta is a natural state you always are in, and you're perfectly in control when you're driving, when you're scrolling. You can get out of it at any time. So you're not completely under the control of a person. The other thing to note, I cannot put thoughts in your mind. Nobody can get you to do something that is not in your best interest. There's something in your mind called the critical factor. So there is your conscious mind, the stuff you know about. It's about 5%, depending on who you ask. There's your subconscious mind, around 95%, the stuff that's deep down in there. Think of it as like the programs in your computer that are running that you don't see. And what protects your subconscious mind is a gate. We call that gate the critical factor. We don't want anything messing with the subconscious mind. It's supposed to be hard to change the programming of your subconscious mind because if it's constantly shifting and changing, we don't know if we're going to get eaten by a bear. The old programs work. We know we're alive. So if we're going to change the program, there better be a damn good reason why. So that gate, the critical factor, it does not open willy-nilly for anyone or anything. That's why it is so hard to change, because there's this protective layer to our subconscious mind. And a hypnotherapist is someone who has the expertise and skill to open that gate to allow in the thoughts that align with your highest good. No matter how good I am as a hypnotherapist, no matter how good someone is as a counselor, we are always programmed for self-preservation. What does that mean? There is no hypnotherapist in the world that will get you to do something that is against your best interest. So if we talk about dealing with these deep emotions, reliving things, going through regressions, it is because your subconscious mind felt safe enough that you were ready to experience it now. There is enough safety, there is enough guidance that you are able to revisit what you're experiencing internally. And maybe that wasn't true in the past, so you locked it in and you kept it safe. But now, if that memory is popping up, that emotion is popping up, trust you are programmed for self-preservation, and it's popping up because this is part of the next evolution of you.
You know, when you think about all that, it's scary to face our inner self because we have that internal dialogue and we know what we did or haven't done. And so when you think about all these things that we're getting there, you know, what's the difference between aligning ourselves and thinking that achievement defines us?
So achievement and that defining us. I'm going to say this. Before you ever achieved anything, before you even learned how to speak, how to write your name, you had value, right? So from the moment that you were born, you have intrinsic value. And you forget that. We are in a society that does value productivity, so we are conditioned from a very early age. If you get stars or you get stickers or you get good grades, and that equates to a certain amount of value, or as you have a job when you're older, your value is somehow equated with the titles that you have and the money that you make. But recognizing we have intrinsic value before we've even learned how to write our name and say our name. So remembering what the intrinsic value of a human is. And it depends on your framework, right? So if you want to look at it from one perspective, from the moment that you were born, you're a product of love. That two people loved each other so much that they were willing to bring a new life into this world in hopes that it would grow their love. Is that not intrinsic value? If you're religious, if you believe that every human has a divine spark and you are a mirror and a reflection of your maker and your master, is that not something that is divine? So recognizing that we have value beyond our productivity and what we achieve. Our achievements are merely a shadow of what we are, right? So I'm going to give you an example of myself. I have worn many hats and many titles. I'm a public speaker. I'm an author. I'm an attorney. I was in the circus. I used to do mixed martial arts and jujitsu and all of those things. That's not who I am. That's what I do. And those are a manifestation of my talents, my skills, the gifts that I was born with, but it's not who I am. The difficulty becomes with us attaching who we are with what we do.
I really appreciate the differentiation of that because oftentimes I find women get lost in that. That, they take care of their children, they're a housewife, they got to do this or that, and they get lost in what they do as part of their identity. And it's so important that we kind of step back for a moment and figure out who we are. And that's what I do in my own therapy is I try to help people figure out who they are so that we can face what's been done and not the other way around. And I find it successful to help people to define who they are so that we can look at, hey, the wisdom that we've gained today is not who we were back then, but the wisdom that we've gained causes the guilt and shame because we felt like we could have done something different. But at the same situation, same knowledge, we would probably do the same thing. It's been a great pleasure in speaking with you, and we want to try to have you back again because you have some plethora of knowledge to share with everybody. And so I greatly appreciate it. Real quick, we got about 2 minutes left. Where can people find more information and a book and things like that? Do you want to kind of share some of that?
Yeah, so if you just Google my name, Lani Gonzales, my website is lanigonzales.com. I do in-person events. I also do hypnotherapy sessions that are private, either in person or virtually. I also have some free resources on my website as well about soul-driven success, about alignment. So if you check that out, there are resources for you there.
So I really appreciate that because sometimes, is what I tell everybody, therapists are like shoes. You got to try one on to find the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you for being on our show. Until next time, take care and God bless. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.